Hello, hello, welcome everyone for joining us today at Crow Shadow. Very new to this streaming event kind of thing, so if anything goes wrong technical wise, I hope we can work it out, but bear with us if anything does go wrong, and we're gonna have a good time. So thank you again. My name is Carl Davis. I'm the Executive Director here at Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts in Pendleton, Oregon. I want to thank everyone for joining us out there from wherever you are in the world. I want to thank Wendy for being here with us today. I'll get to introductions in a moment. I also first want to recognize the Confederated Tribe of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. Give thanks and honor the people of the Umatilla, Cayuse, and Walla Walla. Give thanks and honor them for their stewardship of the land, the air, and the water that we drink. I also want to thank staff of Crow Shadow, Judith Bauman, Nika Blosser, Maggie Middleton, for being amazing staff here and doing so much work to make today happen. I want to thank Peter Walters and Mitch von Schlem for their technical help getting this going. And I want to thank board, staff, volunteers, and donors of Crow Shadow for helping make this place possible. Finally, I want to thank the Ford Family Foundation of Oregon for helping support our residency program through the Golden Spot Award and being able to bring amazing artists to our small neck of the woods to produce some amazing artwork that we can then share with the world. So today it is my honor and pleasure to be introducing our current artist in resident, Wendy Red Star. Wendy is Absoluket, originally from the Crow Reservation in Montana, but now lives and works in Portland. She is an extremely busy artist, curator, author, and mother. Her work is seen in museums and exhibitions such as the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, the Library of Congress in DC, the Portland Art Museum, Seattle Art Museum, and also in recent exhibits at the Newark Museum of Art in New Jersey and Mass MoCA in Massachusetts. She's been in the studio for the last week and a half, working with Judy and Maggie to produce what will be 3 different lithographic editions. And today we're going to be having a brief conversation and then take a quick peek into the studio to see the process of what they're working on and what the final products might be. And then finally, we'll come back here and have some question and answers from the audience. So if you have questions that you think of during this talk, please enter them in the chat, and Nico will be monitoring that, and we'll try to get as many questions answered at the end of the talk as possible. So please welcome Wendy Red Star.
Hi everyone, it's an honor to be here. Thank you to Crow Shadow Art Institute, and I really want to thank Judith and Maggie. They are working so hard to help me create 3 wonderful prints. So I'm just very excited to be here.
And can you introduce your puppy?
Oh yes, this is Udon.
Wendy, in the studio these past couple of days, you've mentioned, I've heard you mention a few times how excited you are about researching your own genealogy and how that's informing your work now. And in turn, you seem to be making some actually very personal prints featuring images of your close family and direct descendants or ascendants. In this new iteration of your work, do you see it as a continuation of your practice, or how do you see it fit into those earlier pieces that you've done? Yeah,
it's definitely a continuation, but I don't think I really thought of that until I did the Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship around 2018. And I think the genealogy aspect came about because I have in the National Museum of the American Indian over 100 objects that are biologically related to me, of different family members. And one of the ways that the NMEI verifies these objects, especially ceremonial objects, if the tribal member wants to get them back, is through genealogy. So that's when I really started to look into it, and some amazing things have happened where I have been lucky enough to find images of some of my great-great-great-grandparents. And so this residency, the inspiration is definitely looking into genealogy, my family tree.
So when you go into those places and undertake this kind of research process, do you see that as, do you see the research informing your work before you go in, or when you're there researching these objects and holding them even, do you think about the continuation of that creative process afterwards and how you're maybe going to convey that experience through your art practice, or are those two separate thoughts?
You know, what ends up happening is I get so overwhelmed, especially, well, any institution that has Crow objects, and just the opportunity to be in those collections and hold some of those objects. But in the case of like the National Museum of the American Indian, the National Anthropological Archives, and the National, I think, Natural History Museum and the Smithsonian, it's so overwhelming because there's so many objects pertaining to my community, and I think my best approach is just being as open as possible and trying to absorb as much as possible. And then when I return home, that's when I start thinking of, or piecing things together, doing some more background research on particular objects that sort of sparked my interest. And then I start formulating like an idea for a piece. So I think I just have to be incredibly open when I'm right in the midst of looking at objects in a collection.
Do you see that work that you're doing at home, how is it like informed through like your previous work, your like large scale installations and things like that? Are you thinking of those kind of projects at home, or do you wait until you're in a space and thinking of those kind of steps up to that point?
You know, I'm thinking of them at home because that's when things start to click, because I'm always gathering different sources and material, and I'm really thinking about like these timelines and like connecting, piecing together these various timelines. But in the case of just like even driving the 3-hour drive from Portland to where Crow Shadow is on the Umatilla reservation, I knew I was going to do something on genealogy, and then all of a sudden I thought about like presenting them with star quilt patterns again as a way to sort of weave this beautiful textile that's so coveted among my community and lots of Native communities as a really kind of wonderful backdrop. So things kind of just click for me. But yeah, sometimes it's right there, and sometimes it takes years for things to kind of come together. It just depends, but it's always an active process of continually like piecing things together.
So with your work, you recently you were a guest editor for Aperture magazine, which they just released that issue. It's amazing, very very cool. If you have a chance, look it up, Aperture magazine. What was the process for that? Did they open up their archives for you to like kind of pull from, or did you come to them with ideas for artists? Because as a curator too, you do a lot of work looking and talking to other artists. So how did that kind of process happen?
So I was actually reached out, Aperture reached out to me through email, and it was about a year ago, and asked me if I would be interested in being a guest editor. And then things started kind of to pick up, and basically they asked me to select different Native artists or Indigenous artists that I was interested in, and think of different theme or a few themes that would sort of be illustrated in the issue. And so kind of with that, I started making a list, and then we started kind of passing things back and forth, but then the pandemic happened. So actually that whole issue was done entirely through the pandemic. And it was a, you know, crazy time, still is, but really wonderful to be able to connect with different Native artists, doing Zoom meetings and things like that, and having conversations that way. And so pretty much it was that. They kind of gave me free reign. They also did a Native issue, I think in the 90s, their first one. And so we sort of pulled from that and looking at that as well. And then from there, kind of one thing led to the next, but it was really great. I had like weekly conversations and I kind of miss them. I miss talking to them all the time.
It's a beautiful issue, and I've only gotten to read a couple of articles in it so far, but very in depth. And there's an interview you did with the archivist at the National, is it the NMAI
Yes.
archivist? And it kind of back and forth about the process of the archives and how those photographs find their way into the archive and how they're disseminated again. So it's a really fascinating issue, and we took part in it kind of third hand a little bit, but there's a few of Wendy's prints from her time at Crow Shadow, which is really exciting. Which kind of brings me to my next question. This is your third time at Crow Shadow, and there's only been a few artists that have kind of come back to the studio to work. I was thinking maybe we could make a three-timer jacket for you so that you can have a three-timers jacket. So what has it been like, this process? You've been here now 3 times, and from the beginning, like the first time you were here to now, like how has it changed? How is it the same? How do you feel about it in that time period? Well,
it's just a true honor to be here 3 times. That's incredible, and I feel like I've grown immensely. The first time I came, I was a young mom, and it was a great opportunity for me to have like dedicated time, and I worked with Frank Jensen. And that was the first time I've ever done anything with printmaking before. So that was a huge learning curve. And then the second time I felt I was in a kind of very sweet spot, and kind of knew what was going to happen. So I feel like Frank and I worked with Frank, we're really on to something. And then this time it feels like a brand new experience because I'm working with Judith. Mm-hmm. So it's been really exciting. I feel like we're starting to like really kind of click and get into the groove of things.
Not to make you like tout too much about Crow Shadow, like force you to do this, but could you talk about how Crow Shadow's maybe like what it's meant to your career in these different time periods? I mean, over 10 years, it's you know, yeah, it's a lifetime in an art career somehow. So
I mean, it's just been incredible because not only am I first off, I just have to say this, and no offense to other artist residencies, but I just don't really have much luck really being productive and getting things accomplished. But I still have a great time and meet and have new experiences and things. But Crow Shadow's been pretty much the only residency where I've actually accomplished and finished work. So that's amazing. And then after that, I just feel like Crow Shadow's just been incredibly supportive because the work gets shown, and I'll get press with the work showing at various institutions. And so that's been something that's been really lovely. And then selling the prints isn't bad either. So that's always wonderful too. But I just feel like this residency really resonates with me because this reservation reminds me so much of my reservation in Montana. And so there's a sort of magic that I feel, because I just feel very much at home here. But yeah, I feel like Crow Shadow's grown with me along with my career, and it's just kind of like you guys are running parallel with me. And so it's just really wonderful to come back and continue to have prints and see what happens next.
Great. Thank you so much. So we're gonna try this we're gonna move into the studio now. We're gonna see some work in progress, and Wendy might chat a little bit about what's on the tables and what they're actually pulling prints in the studio. So hold on, we'll see how this works.
So this is what I've been working on, and this is some of the variations of prints. And so by the time I'm done, we'll have 3 very solid, beautiful prints. The first one that we started working on, actually you can kind of see the remnants of it at the back wall there. And this one is about 4 generations. And so the 4 generations are my grandmother, Amy Red Star, and then my father, Wallace Red Star Jr., and myself, Wendy Red Star, and then my daughter, Beatrice Red Star Fletcher. And I was going to title this piece after our crow names, but using the English translation of them. So my dad's crow name in English is kind to everybody, which I really love, kind of the contrast between the Marine and his crow name. And my grandma, her crow name is self-reliant. My crow name is one who is talented. And then my daughter's crow name is Sandhill Crane Woman. And then this is the third print that we're working on. Different colors, but kind of similar. And this is my great-great-grandma, and her name is Her Dreams Are True. And her English name is Julia Badboy, and she was married to, I don't know if they were actually married, but to this man named Dust. And then she went on to marry another guy named Bearground. So you'll often see her in the archives as Julia Badboy or Bearground. But she had a son with Dust, and that is my grandma's father. And then this is the third print, which is my great-great-grandfather, and his name is Dust. You guys want to see me just hold? Yeah. Yes.
So we just put that red layer on, and then we're building up. It looks amazing. And we've been working on this for the last 3 days.
So then this one will eventually end up here, the other scheme. And then this gives you a little bit of the process over here, all the hard work involved. A lot of matching and lining up angles and points. And Dust was a Crow Tribal Police.
So Wendy decided to do the star pattern quilt, and it needed to be very technical and very crisp and clean, was what she said to me. So we kind of made a jig for all of the pieces that we've been working on, and we made ruby with cut stencils. So that's what I've been working on, and then Maggie's been mixing all the color with Wendy. And it's a very time-consuming process. Any comments? Oh, comments about the collaborative process?
Other than like, it's been incredible, and I feel so grateful to you guys. Long hours, and I just have to say I don't normally have any assistants, so it's just incredible to have Maggie and Judy come every morning and work till well past when they should leave, dedicated to my crazy ideas. So yeah, it's just been great, and we're making really beautiful, magical things happen. So yeah, it's just been, it's a lot of work, but I feel like things are coming together, and I think it's going to be some really powerful images at the end.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the magic of it. I'd also like to point out to everyone that this is a brand new press paid for through a grant from the Ford Family Foundation, which has been immensely helpful in both our studio practice and the institute itself. So
We absolutely could not have done some of these prints that we're doing with Wendy without this press, because it would have broken me. Hoping sometime in the spring. I'm anticipating printing them through January and February and March. But the prints have to be completely dry before we put the shingle elements on. So hopefully this spring, brand new springtime babies.
all right. So a couple questions that we received prior to the chat today, an email. This one, actually, this is something we haven't talked about, is your daughter, Beatrice. To what extent is your daughter continuing to be a collaborator in your work?
So she retired herself a couple years ago at age 11. So she's 13 now. And we started a collaborative practice back in 2014 when she was 7. And so for now, basically, what's great is that through our collaboration, we do have some objects that were made, a photo series called Absolute Feminist. And now institutions have asked if they want to bring B in. But she said no, she's still retired, but she's totally okay. She's given me the okay to show some of the costumes and things that she wore as a tour guide. So basically it's kind of developed into that, where she's sort of giving me oversight, but she said I have to do all the work. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing like what happens the older she gets, and you know how she'll feel about the work. And then of course there's a photo, you know, of her in one of the prints for this new body of work, and I called her up and she told me like which photo would be okay of her to use. And so it's basically that, and she's sort of giving me feedback on the work that I'm producing. But that's another thing that is really wonderful. I think my second time when I came to Crow Shadow, that Beatrice came with me, and my dogs. So that's another thing that I'm just truly thankful that I'm able to bring my kids with me.
It's one of my favorite memories of your residency here was actually when you came back to sign the prints, and Bee came with you, and she set up shop. She started making drawings while she was here, and then she put them on the wall and sold them for $1 each. I don't know which one to take. She said, you can take all of them.
Yes. Yeah, she's like a real go-getter when she kind of get her going. But that's been wonderful because I see some of her prints hanging up around here. So it's just good memories.
So another question from email was, in the print, Yakima or Yakima, not for me to say. The question is, are you jabbing at the way Europeans meddle with the names of indigenous people? So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I'm not from this area. So that was something that was kind of interesting when I did meet some people from the Yakima Nation. And they were telling me that the difference between the actual city or town and their community. And I was like, oh, that's so, things like that always kind of fascinate me. So yes, correct.
So when, I'm gonna try to pronounce it, Absluke?
Apsalagat.
Absalaga, there, thank you. Absalaga. So does using Crow and Absalaga interchangeably, is that part of that too, or how?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's kind of individual. So we're recognized by the U.S. government as the Crow tribe, but Crow is actually a mistranslation of what we call ourselves. So Apsalaga is, when it's translated, is children of the large-beaked bird. And I just imagine some, you know, white person, a Apsalaga person was probably like pointing like at some bird, and maybe it was crow, and poof, we're crows now. But yeah, no, I'm totally, my stance on it is that it's fine to use Crow or Apsalagat, but in my own writing and things like that, I promote Apsalagat over Crow.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about the language is that it wasn't originally a written language. So that's my father's first language, and then he learned English when he was 5 or 7 or something like that. And the Crow language was then turned into a written language around the 70s, 80s. And so he himself can't read the written language. Mm. So it's kind of this influx, constantly changing, because it's so new.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
One more question from email, and then Nika took the questions away, so I'll get those back. So this question is kind of a metaphor question, but this person asked, in thinking about stormwater management as a metaphor for the self, how does the shape of your studio help you self-regulate? Or in other words, do you have a regular studio space, and how does the shape or physical nature of that space inform your practice?
So I found that to be a very fascinating question. And I have never actually, since I left graduate school, have had an actual studio space, and I've sort of made whatever, you know, area in the home that I'm living in a place to work. So I used to rent for a long time, and the living room was my studio. And now, you know, I have a basement, but I have another room that's supposed to be my office, but it's turning into kind of like the studio space. So for me, I guess my physical home is the best environment for me to work in at the moment. I'm always really jealous though when I see like an artist like Marie Watt has this like amazing studio space, and I could really get into that. But I found success in just having space or creating a space within my house.
Okay. So Nika's coming back to the questions. Thank you. Let's see. Well, this actually is a question we should have asked Judy, but I can kind of answer it too. Edition size for these prints that we're producing now. I think at the moment, so I'll kind of answer this question. We're limited by kind of the technical aspects of it, and the more technical it gets, the lower the edition gets, because the variability has become greater. But you know, we're really excited about Wendy's work, and we want to be able to produce as many as we can. So our general, you know, edition size is between 12 and 20. Really hoping to get a few more than that for this round of editions, but we'll never know until the moment they're signed, because there's so many variables in that process. So for Wendy, what does the creation or assemblage process look like for these prints with various photos and imagery? Like, how do you decide which prints go, or which images go with which prints, and that kind of process?
This is gonna sound really kooky, but I think when I like actually tap into like the creative process, things become very intuitive, and they just sort of work and click. I know that's not really answering the question, but I think I started like with the 4 generations, myself, my daughter, my dad, and my grandma, having those actual images in mind. And then from there, I was able to think of like a good color scheme that would complement each of those. And then just having the star, the lone star pattern is such a like strong, powerful pattern that it really kind of holds all those images together. So, but a lot of it is just really intuitive, and it kind of like happens quite quickly in the moment. Great.
So we have a question from Lisa Udine. I'm interested in the request for a, quote, technical, crisp, clean look. Is that across all 3 prints in the series? And can you elaborate a little on why these qualities?
You know what it's about is I actually made a body of work, I can't recall the date, called the Family Portrait Series, which I physically made star quilts. And I didn't actually really know how to sew. And I'm based in Portland, Oregon, and they have these amazing sewing shops. And so I remember walking in and telling these women who've sewn probably their whole lives that I wanted to make a star quilt, and they're like laughing at me because it's a really technical quilt where you have to match up all these different points and seams. And they sort of kind of refused to tell me how to do that and kept pushing me towards like a simple design. But me being stubborn and just not knowing what I was doing, I was able to buy this amazing video. This woman, that's all she does is teach people how to make star quilts. And I taught myself how to do it. And she sort of went over the marks of like what makes a great star quilt. And that is like all the points matching up, especially the center point. And so I sort of translated that over to Judy, who's just been so incredible because it is hard. And so what I'm saying, a crisp, technical print is just carrying over from actually making the fabric star quilts and wanting the points to all match up. And it's very tricky. So she has to do a bunch of registrations, and at one point we did put lines over the top to make things even sort of tighter, because I think that's the brilliance of the star quilt. It's just everything lining up. So that's what I mean by that.
So kind of a follow-up question to that is, I'm not sure exactly what this means, but is the Lone Star an important part of crow culture? Is that?
You know, it's there's actually some great books about the history of the star quilt in Native culture, specifically Plains Indian culture, and that it was taught to Native people through missionaries and things like that. And so my own personal experience with it is growing up, we have these things in crow culture. A lot of Plains cultures have it, giveaways during like a powwow. A family would gather all these gifts and then call their clan members and give things away. And so the coveted things to give away were Pendleton blankets for top, and then equivalent to a Pendleton blanket was a star quilt. So everybody was like trying to find these star quilts and make them, or if you made them in the community, like you were kind of a big deal. And so for me, that's my experience, but I think there's like a rich historical history to the star quilt in Plains communities and making them. That's super fascinating. So that's kind of the interest. And, you know, I'm thinking about my family generations and sort of that being so precious is equivalent to a star quilt.
Great. I think, unless anyone else has any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, we just got one. From Catherine Blood, who is the curator of prints and papers at the Library of Congress. So thank you for your question, Catherine. Following up on your star quilt discussion, can you talk a bit more about the different aspects of clothing and fabric as a recurring theme in your work?
Hi, Catherine. It's so great. We've been doing some email communication back and forth, and I'm just thrilled to have work in the Library of Congress and Crow Shadow prints in there. I love textile. I love the history of textile, and I'm obsessed with the elk tooth dress, which is our traditional dress, which is made out of wool trade cloth, which was a type of wool material that was traded by like traders to Native people, and elk teeth, the two eye teeth of an elk make up an elk tooth dress, and the eye teeth of an elk represent sort of the status of the hunting and trading abilities of Crow men. So the more teeth on your dress, you know, the better hunters or traders you have in the family. And now most of them are made out of resin. But for me, like, it's just sort of this real interesting history of like trade within these like textiles and fabrics. And so, yeah, I guess I'm really interested in the trade aspect and in that history, and then also how Native people, crows, have adapted different materials and sort of Indianized them in very interesting ways. And I would say that the star quilt is actually that way as well. I feel like a good Native star quilt is always solid colors, and then you see sort of non-Native quilts, they incorporate like patterns and things like that that aren't solids, which interestingly enough, I have like gingham pattern in one of mine because I really kind of wanted to go for this vintage feel. But so yeah, it's just like really the history of material and textile that fascinates me.
Great. So I have a couple more quick questions, and then we're going to have to wrap it up in a few minutes. But in what ways do you think your art is specifically giving back to your community?
You know, I think over the last few years, it's sort of come to me that I realized that really my work is about kind of, you could think of it as a quilt where I'm piecing together these different timelines. A lot of these timelines that have been suppressed or buried through the work that I'm doing. And my hope is really that it's just another stepping stone for the next crow who is trying to find information, that hopefully they can use my work then to jump off to the next point. So really it's about the next generation, and hopefully they'll make great use of the work that I'm doing and the research that I've done.
All right, so one last question, then I think we'll wrap it up. But and this kind of feeds into maybe what we're doing here right now, because this is such a strange time in the world. But can you also talk a little bit about how you use your use of social media in your art practice and your process?
Yes, it's I think as an artist, there's kind of like there's many ways you can approach social media. And for myself, I think what I like to do is kind of take people on the art, I call them art adventures. So right now I'm on this amazing art adventure here at Crow Shadow, and I'd really like to show the behind the scenes, because I knew nothing about printmaking when I came here. And so documenting like the process and how things come together. I'm a big process nerd. I love to know about other artists and how they make things happen. And so that's sort of the goal of a lot of my social media, is just to kind of give you that inside look. And when I was actually doing my Smithsonian Research Artist Fellowship, I gave a lot of inside looks into the archive and pulling drawers open full of Salaga material culture, because I know that's what I would want to see. So yeah, and I've gotten some really wonderful feedback. I really appreciate it that people really enjoy seeing the process of what's happening here at Crow Shadow.
Let's see. So a lot of thank yous right now. And I want to thank Wendy again for your time. This has been, a very special thing to bring Wendy back to the studio to make more prints with us. We have been so lucky to get to work with her over the years and have her prints both in our studio and gallery space, and then we can send that out to the world to enjoy through our exhibitions, our loan program of our permanent collection work, and then for sale through our publication process. The editions are made so that they can be shared with the world, with individuals, with collections, and it's a special thing to be able to see the work in process, see the kind of hard work that goes into it, and then the payoff in the end is being able to share that with everyone. And one thing that we are always looking for is support of Crow Shadow. So this is my small appeal to the people watching, and maybe the people who will be watching this in the future. We're a nonprofit in Eastern Oregon, and we rely on the support of the people that are viewing today that very generously gave donations to join us. But in the long run, we still have to continue keeping the lights on and the doors open, bringing artists into the studio. It costs money for everything that we do. And so the support of people like you is always very helpful. We just found out this morning that we were approved for a grant from the NATO Foundation of Portland for a traditional arts coordinator for Crow Shadow. So this is something that we have been trying to get in place for a while. Someone who will be here on a regular basis to help coordinate our traditional arts programs, to bring in master artists from the communities around us to teach and share their knowledge of basket weaving, beadwork, leather work, anything like that they want to teach, and we want to be able to bring that, facilitate those classes. So they've also offered between now and Friday to do a matching grant of up to $5,000 in donations. So if you're so willing, please think about donating to help match that grant. I want to thank again Wendy for her time here. I want to thank Peter and Mitch for their technical prowess, and the staff again at Crow Shadow. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.